Chief Jonathan sat in his grand chair, overlooking the vast expanse of his business empire. His life had been full of triumphs, accolades, and wealth. But among all the things he cherished, the one thing that made him the proudest was his son, James. For many years, James had been studying medicine abroad, and despite his privileged position, he had always been humble, focused on his studies. Jonathan would often sit by the fireplace at night, pondering what kind of man his son would become. Finally, after years of anticipation, James was coming back to Nigeria. He had graduated, and his father couldn't have been prouder. But there was more to it than just the academic achievement. Jonathan had always hoped that his son would find a woman worthy of him, one who would love him for who he was not, for the wealth and status that came with being the heir to Jonathan Group of companies. Jonathan had a plan in mind, but he didn't want to rush things. James had to find love on his own terms, and so he kept a careful eye on two young women who worked for the company. They were hardworking, intelligent, and respectful traits he knew James valued. Meanwhile, across the country, James had his own thoughts. He had never cared for the idea of arranged marriages, nor had he ever liked the idea of using his family's wealth as a means of attracting women. He had always wanted something real, something that transcended money and status. He had seen too many people enter his life only to disappear once his wealth was exposed. It had disheartened him to no end, but he had never let it break his spirit. Deep inside, he was still that idealistic boy who wanted to find someone who would love him for who he was. On the evening he was set to return, Jonathan called James to remind him of their earlier conversation about marriage. "James, I've been thinking about two wonderful women who work for me," his father had said on the phone. "They are educated, respectful, and hardworking. I think they would be a good match for you." James raised an eyebrow, but laughed softly. "Dad, I don't need you to choose a wife for me. I'll find my own way." James was determined to avoid anything that could lead to a forced marriage. But then, an idea hit him. What if he could return home without his wealth in tow? He could live as a regular man, one who would be judged on his character and actions rather than his bank account. He could take a job as a security guard in his father's company, keeping his true identity a secret and testing the authenticity of the women his father had in mind. If they loved him for who he was, not for the wealth and power he had at his disposal, then perhaps they were the ones he could trust. The next morning, as the workers of Jonathan Group of companies went about their usual tasks, James arrived at the company gates, disguised in a faded blue security guard uniform. The day was warm, and the sun beat down heavily on the compound. He felt strange, almost as though he were playing a part in some kind of game. His entire life had been full of luxury expensive suits, private jets, and opulent homes. Now, he stood in a worn-out uniform, a cap pulled low over his face, holding a broom. He was anonymous, invisible. To everyone who walked past him, he was just another worker. Inside the company, people went about their business, oblivious to the presence of the new security guard. But one woman noticed him immediately. Sarah, a young woman who worked in the finance department, smiled as she walked past him. "Good morning, Ogre Security," she said with a cheerful greeting. James smiled back, adjusting his cap. "Good morning, madam." It was a small gesture, but it made James pause. She had greeted him with kindness, something that wasn't common for people in his position. As he continued to sweep the compound, he couldn't help but observe the people around him. There was Emily, a woman who worked in the marketing department. She had walked past him several times, her gaze focused ahead, never acknowledging him. To her, he was nothing more than a faceless security guard, just another part of the scenery. James thought about his father's words. He knew Emily was one of the women Chief Jonathan had in mind for him, but seeing her disregard for the workers around her made James feel uneasy. It was clear that Emily had a sense of entitlement, and that was a trait he despised. He wasn't looking for someone who would act as though the world owed her everything. But Sarah, on the other hand, seemed different. She had looked him in the eye and spoken to him as if he were an equal. It was a small act of kindness, but it was enough to make James take notice. Days went by, and James continued to play his role as a lowly security guard. He spent his days observing the employees of Jonathan's group of companies, paying close attention to how they treated others. Emily, with her polished appearance and haughty attitude, seemed to think she was already part of the family. She was always at the center of attention, talking about the future she had envisioned as the wife of Jonathan's son. She believed it was her destiny to marry him, and she wasn't shy about letting everyone know. Sarah, on the other hand, kept to herself. She didn't talk much about her personal life, and when she did speak, it was always about work. Her genuine kindness stood out to James more each day. She always made sure to greet him with a smile, and sometimes she would even bring him cold water during the sweltering afternoons. It was simple, but it meant something to James. It was real, unpretentious. Unlike Emily, Sarah didn't feel the need to show off her beauty or her ambition. She simply worked hard and treated everyone around her with respect. As the days wore on, the tension began to rise in the office. Emily had begun to take liberties, treating the staff with disdain. She would give orders to others as if she were already the boss's wife. She even began to ignore James completely, as though he were beneath her. She hadn't seen him as anything more than a security guard, and now that she was closer to the company's inner circle, she was beginning to act like she already owned it all. But the more she distanced herself from James, the more he became intrigued by Sarah. She was quiet, humble, and kind. It was everything he wanted in a partner. James found himself growing more drawn to Sarah every day, but he kept his distance, still in his disguise, uncertain of how she would react once she knew the truth. Would she still treat him the same way? Or would she, too, be swayed by the allure of his family's wealth? He didn't want to find out too soon, not until he had a clearer sense of who she was. The days passed in a blur for James. Each morning he put on the faded blue uniform. Each evening he returned to his quarters in the back of the building. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Sarah's kindness stood out against the backdrop of Emily's ambition, and despite his growing feelings for Sarah, he remained torn. The game he had set in motion was becoming harder to play, but he couldn't afford to stop now. It wasn't just about finding out who truly loved him. It was about proving that love existed without strings attached, without the allure of wealth or status. Meanwhile, Emily continued to assert herself. Her arrogance was growing by the day, and it seemed to fuel her obsession with the idea that she was destined to marry Jonathan's son. She began to gossip with her colleagues, boasting that it was only a matter of time before she was formally introduced as the future wife of the billionaire heir. Her words seemed to carry weight among the staff, who whispered to one another, unsure of whether to take her seriously or not. But James knew better. He saw through Emily's act. Beneath the makeup and designer clothes, there was something shallow about her. She was more concerned with appearances than with true connection, and that was something James couldn't overlook. The more time he spent watching her, the more certain he became that Emily was not the one for him. He was beginning to understand that true love wasn't about grandeur or promises of riches. It was about something deeper. It was Sarah's quiet confidence that had captured his attention. Her humility and respect for others, her quiet strength, these were qualities that James had longed for in a partner. But he couldn't make a decision just yet. He had to let things play out. The test had only just begun. Confidence was growing with each passing day. Her behavior became bolder, more assertive. She began openly discussing her imagined future with James in the office, telling her friends and co-workers that it was only a matter of time before Jonathan would introduce her as his son's fiancée. She would walk through the hallways with her shoulders back, acting as though she already had everything figured out. James, meanwhile, continued his silent observations. He began to question whether he had made the right choice in pretending to be someone he wasn't. Every time he interacted with Sarah, he found himself more and more drawn to her. Yet he couldn't help but feel the weight of his father's expectations pressing on him. Jonathan had been clear. He wanted James to find someone suitable, someone who could carry on the family legacy. But what if the woman who truly understood him wasn't part of that world at all? As he walked through the hallways, seeing Emily's attention-seeking behavior and hearing her boasts about her future, James felt increasingly uncomfortable. Her sense of entitlement was unbearable. What bothered him most was how she treated the staff, especially the workers like himself. The way she belittled others in her pursuit of power and influence showed that she was more interested in status than in love. He knew it was only a matter of time before she would make her move. Emily, meanwhile, was becoming more obsessed with James. The thought of him choosing someone else, someone like Sarah was, eating at her. She had been so sure of her place in his life, but now, seeing the way Sarah treated him, she couldn't help but feel threatened. She knew she needed to act fast if she was to secure her place as the future Mrs. Jonathan's heir. But Emily had underestimated Sarah. While she flaunted her wealth and connections, Sarah quietly observed and listened. Her calm demeanor made her seem distant, but inside, she was a force to be reckoned with. She had spent enough time working at Jonathan Group of Companies to know that relationships based on manipulation and status never lasted. What she valued most was authenticity, something that both Emily and James seemed to lack. The weeks dragged on as James continued his quiet observation. It wasn't just the women who he had to judge, it was the entire company. The workplace environment was beginning to reflect the growing tension between Sarah and Emily. People were divided in their support of the two women, and whispers of rivalry began to spread through the office. But James remained unmoved. His disguise was working. He was learning about the people who surrounded him, and he was beginning to see who was truly genuine. He had expected Emily's behavior to become more obvious, but even he hadn't realized how far she would go. She began to subtly manipulate the office staff, spreading rumors about Sarah and trying to undermine her. She convinced some of her colleagues to side with her, promising that once she married James, they would all benefit. James watched from the sidelines, disgusted by her tactics. But Sarah, ever the professional, didn't engage. She simply carried on with her work, focusing on the things that truly mattered to her. But there were moments, fleeting but undeniable, when James saw a different side of Sarah. She would slip into the office after hours, helping other staff members with their work, staying late to ensure that everything was done right. There was no fanfare, no applause, just a quiet, steady commitment to the work that had earned her respect in the company. It was these small moments that began to chip away at James's uncertainty. James realized that he was no longer just observing his potential future wife. He was falling for Sarah. He had never felt this way before. The more time he spent around her, the more he understood that this was the kind of love he had been seeking. It wasn't flashy or grand, it was real, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. The tension inside Jonathan Group of Companies was palpable. Everyone seemed to be choosing sides between Emily and Sarah. Emily, with her overt confidence and ambition, was now flaunting her supposed future role as the future daughter-in-law of Chief Jonathan. She had become more brazen, frequently telling her colleagues that it was only a matter of time before she was married into wealth. Her audacity and arrogance became more pronounced, and she was growing increasingly confident that nothing would stand in her way. But Sarah, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. She carried herself with quiet grace and professionalism. She knew the stakes were high, but she was determined to stay true to herself. Despite the growing tension, Sarah never wavered in her work. She focused on improving her skills, helping colleagues when they needed it, and always treating everyone with respect. The contrast between her humble demeanor and Emily's arrogance was stark. James watched as the days passed. His disguise was starting to feel like more than just a test. It was becoming his reality. He felt the weight of the situation on his shoulders. He had begun to care deeply for Sarah, but he wasn't sure if she would accept him when the truth was revealed. Would she love him for who he was? Or would she be just another person interested in his money? He had to know for sure before he made any decisions. James's internal struggle continued. Every time he interacted with Sarah, he felt a stronger pull towards her. He found himself eagerly looking forward to their brief conversations, even though they were always polite and professional. He had never been more captivated by someone in his life. Sarah's kindness, humility, and respect for everyone around her were traits that Emily lacked entirely. As for Emily, her true colors began to show more and more each day. She became increasingly entitled, and her behavior in the office grew more erratic. She began to openly belittle Sarah, dismissing her work and making snide comments about her humble background. Emily made no secret of her plans to marry James, even going as far as to tell her colleagues that she was already preparing for the life of a billionaire's wife. Her sense of superiority was infuriating, and yet she still hadn't realized the one thing that was most important: James wasn't interested in her. James couldn't help but feel disgusted by Emily's behavior. He had seen enough to know she wasn't the one, but he still hadn't revealed his true identity to Sarah. He knew that revealing the truth might change everything, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for that kind of uncertainty. One afternoon, as James was on duty, he saw Sarah walking toward the security gate. She was carrying a small bag, and her face was calm, though a touch of weariness was visible in her eyes. It had been a particularly hectic week, and James could tell she was exhausted. As she approached the gate, she smiled at him, and James felt a warmth flood through him. "Good afternoon, Mr. Guard," she said gently. James smiled back. "Good afternoon, Miss Sarah." Without thinking, he added, "Would you like a bottle of water? I know it's been a long day." Sarah paused, surprised but grateful. "Thank you, James. I mean, Mr. Guard, but that's very kind of you." As he handed her the bottle, she looked into his eyes, her gaze softening. "You know," she said, "you've been so kind and thoughtful. It's rare to meet someone who actually cares about others, especially around here." James could feel his heart skip a beat. For the first time, he felt like Sarah was seeing him for who he really was. Not just a poor security guard, but someone with depth, someone capable of kindness. Her words were a turning point for him. "Thank you," James said softly. "That means a lot." For a brief moment, the world seemed to stand still between them. Sarah didn't know it, but she had just shown James that there was still hope that true love could exist, even amidst the wealth and power that surrounded them. The next few days passed in a blur. Emily's behavior grew more erratic, and she became increasingly vocal about her intentions to marry James. She spoke to everyone she knew about her supposed future as the wife of the billionaire heir. She even began dressing more provocatively, trying to draw attention wherever she went. But the more she pushed, the more she revealed just how shallow she truly was. Sarah, on the other hand, remained consistent. She didn't change her demeanor or her approach to work. She was always kind, respectful, and humble. Her quiet strength became more evident to James, and it was clear to him that she was everything he had been looking for. James knew he had to make a decision soon. The game was coming to an end, and the time to reveal his true identity was fast approaching. But the more he observed, the more certain he became that Sarah was the one. She had proven time and again that her love was not based on money or status, but on genuine connection. One evening, as he was about to leave for his quarters, he saw Sarah standing outside, looking up at the stars. Her face was serene, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. James approached her quietly. "Miss Sarah," he said softly. She turned, startled, but smiled when she saw who it was. "Mr. Guard," she said, her voice warm but weary. "You're looking at the stars," James remarked. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah's smile faded slightly. "I was just thinking about what I want out of life. It's hard to find real love in a world like this. People are always looking for something from you: money, status, power, but not real affection." James nodded. "I understand." For a moment, they were silent. Then, Sarah spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "I've always believed that true love is about accepting someone for who they really are, not what they have or what they can give you." James felt a lump form in his throat. "You're right," he said quietly, "and that's why I think I've finally found the answer." That night, James couldn't sleep. His heart was racing. He had made up his mind. The next day, he would reveal his true identity to Sarah. He knew it was a gamble, but he had to take it. He had to know if she would love him for who he was, not just the man behind the company. The next morning, he showed up at work in his usual security guard uniform. But this time, there was a new sense of purpose in his step. He approached Sarah, who was just leaving her office for a coffee break. "Miss Sarah," he called. She turned, surprised but smiling. "Mr. Guard, you're looking more serious than usual today." James took a deep breath. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you, something important." She looked at him curiously. "What's going on?" He hesitated for a moment, then decided to take the plunge. "I'm not just a security guard. My name is James Jonathan. I am Chief Jonathan's son." Sarah blinked, her expression unreadable. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, slowly, Sarah smiled. "I knew there was something different about you," she said softly. James's heart soared. "You didn't mind that I was pretending to be someone I'm not?" "No," she replied. "Because you showed me who you really are, the man behind the uniform. I've never been interested in money or status, James. I've always believed that love is about honesty and trust." Tears welled up in James's eyes. He had found what he had been searching for: true love. And it wasn't in the form of an extravagant lifestyle or grand gestures. It was right in front of him, in the form of Sarah's quiet and unwavering kindness. James stood by the entrance of the office, waiting for Sarah to pass by. She had just finished a meeting with the marketing team, and as usual, her demeanor was calm and collected. The moment she passed him, James could feel his heart racing. He had revealed his identity to her, and he was eager to see her reaction. As Sarah walked past, she smiled at him. "Good morning, Mr. Guard," she said with a playful twinkle in her eye. There was no awkwardness, no change in the way she treated him. It was as though nothing had changed at all. James felt a rush of relief. Maybe revealing his identity hadn't been such a risk after all. The sincerity in her smile, the ease with which she interacted with him, all but confirmed that Sarah wasn't interested in him because of his wealth. She valued him for the man he truly was. "Good morning, Miss Sarah," he replied, keeping his voice steady. As the day wore on, James felt more and more certain that his feelings for Sarah were genuine. There was no pretending when it came to her, no grand gestures needed. It was clear that she cared for him, not because of his last name, but because of who he was at his core. Despite his growing confidence, James knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The tension in the office was palpable. Emily's ambitions continued to bubble to the surface. She had begun telling anyone who would listen about her future with Jonathan's son. The fact that she had been so open about her intentions made James uncomfortable. It wasn't just her overconfidence that bothered him. It was the way she disregarded others. She treated the staff like they were beneath her, constantly throwing around her supposed future status as the wife of the heir. James couldn't stand it. He knew that he had to face Emily head on. She had shown him her true nature, and there was no turning back. It wasn't just about the woman he wanted to marry. It was about creating a future based on honesty, trust, and real values. As long as Emily remained in the picture, he wasn't sure if that was even possible. As the days went by, Emily's attitude became more brazen. She started dressing more provocatively, trying to catch James's attention. Every time she passed him, she would smile flirtatiously, tossing her hair and making sure he saw her, yet never acknowledging his presence. James could tell she was desperate. The confidence she once had now seemed more like a facade. She wasn't truly confident. She was insecure. Emily wanted to control the narrative, to be seen as the one who had everything figured out. But James wasn't fooled. He couldn't help but pity her. She was so wrapped up in her own desires for power and influence that she couldn't see the real value in genuine love. Emily's world was built on appearances, and James wasn't interested in that world. He wanted something more meaningful, more sincere. It was becoming clear that Emily wouldn't give up easily. She had set her sights on him, and it was only a matter of time before she would try to make a move. But James was resolute. He wouldn't let her manipulate him, not when he had found someone as genuine as Sarah. As James continued to observe both women, he began to see the cracks in Emily's character. One afternoon, he overheard a conversation in the break room. Emily was talking to one of her close friends, boasting about how she would soon become the next Mrs. Jonathan. "We'll be living the dream," she said, almost giddy with excitement. "Everything I've ever wanted, money, power, respect, will be mine. It's just a matter of time." Her words struck James like a cold slap. This wasn't about love. This was about using someone for personal gain. Emily didn't see him as a partner. She saw him as a means to an end. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to stay true to herself. Even as the pressure from Emily mounted, Sarah remained unshaken. She never spoke ill of anyone and never sought to undermine others. She was kind, genuine, and loyal traits James admired deeply. That afternoon, James made a decision. The time had come for him to reveal his feelings for Sarah, not just as a security guard, but as the heir to Jonathan Group of companies. He knew it was risky, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized he couldn't keep hiding forever. Sarah deserved to know the truth. James found Sarah in the break room, quietly sipping her coffee. She looked up as he entered, offering him a smile. "Hey, Mr. Guard, how's your day going?" she asked warmly. James took a deep breath. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. It's important." She put down her coffee cup, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What's going on, James?" He smiled nervously. "I'm not just a security guard. My name is James Jonathan, the son of Chief Jonathan, the owner of the company you work for." For a long moment, Sarah didn't say anything. She simply stared at him, processing the information. James began to regret his decision, wondering if he had ruined everything. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I knew there was something different about you," she said, her eyes locking with his. "But I wasn't interested in your last name, James. I was interested in who you are." Relief washed over James as he let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "You don't mind?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "No," she said, her smile returning. "In fact, I'm glad you told me. It means a lot that you trust me." Despite Sarah's warm response, James couldn't help but feel the looming storm in the air. Emily was not someone to be taken lightly, and he knew she wouldn't take rejection easily. She had already shown her obsession with him, and he knew she would stop at nothing to try to win him over. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed unfazed by the developments. She treated James as she always had, with kindness and respect. It was as though the revelation of his identity hadn't changed anything between them. Her sincerity was a balm to his worried soul. But Emily wasn't backing down. She began to spread rumors about Sarah, claiming that she wasn't really interested in James, but in his family's wealth. She whispered in the ears of anyone who would listen, trying to poison the well. The more Emily stirred the pot, the more tensions rose in the office. People began to question Sarah's motives, and James could see that Emily was determined to turn everyone against her. James knew it was time to step in. He couldn't allow Emily's lies to destroy the one good thing in his life. He had already made his decision. It was Sarah. He wanted not the ambitious, calculating Emily. James had enough. He decided it was time to confront Emily once and for all. He found her in her office, speaking to a few of her colleagues about her supposed future with him. "Is it true, James?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Are you really choosing Sarah over me?" James stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Yes, Emily, I'm choosing Sarah. Not because of who she is, but because of who she is not. She's not like you. She doesn't use people to get ahead. She loves me, not for my last name or my money." Emily's face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this," she spat. "I will make sure you regret this decision." James stood his ground. "I've already made my choice, Emily, and I won't change it." With that, he turned and walked out of her office, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. It was time for him to build the life he had always wanted. With Sarah by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The following days were filled with whispers and tension. News of James's confrontation with Emily spread through the office like wildfire. Many of the employees had been quietly rooting for Emily, believing her ambitious nature would eventually win her the position of the future Mrs. Jonathan. However, James's decision to stand firm with Sarah shocked everyone. Emily, seething with frustration, intensified her efforts to turn people against Sarah. She would often drop subtle hints and sly remarks, attempting to undermine Sarah's reputation. "She's not cut out for this life," Emily would say, casting doubts about Sarah's ability to handle the responsibilities of the Jonathan family. But despite all the negativity Emily threw at her, Sarah remained unfazed. She didn't react to the gossip or rumors. She continued to do her job with integrity and focus, winning even more respect from those around her. She knew the only thing that mattered was being true to herself. And that was something no amount of gossip or manipulation could take away. James watched it all unfold from the sidelines, unsure of how far Emily would go to destroy what he had with Sarah. But he was resolved to stand by Sarah. He would protect her from Emily's venomous words. The strain of the ongoing office drama was starting to take its toll on Sarah. While she didn't show it outwardly, James could tell that the constant pressure was weighing on her. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in the middle of a bitter rivalry. One evening, as they walked to the parking lot together after work, James turned to her with concern in his eyes. "Are you okay, Sarah?" he asked softly. "I know things haven't been easy." She smiled at him, but it was a tired smile. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm just trying to focus on the work. I can't control what others say or think. I just need to keep doing my job." James reached for her hand, his voice filled with sincerity. "You don't have to do this alone, Sarah. I'm here for you, and I'll make sure Emily doesn't hurt you." Sarah stopped walking and looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, James. You've already shown me more than anyone else ever has. I don't need anything more than your support." In that moment, James felt his heart swell with affection for her. The connection they shared wasn't based on wealth or status, it was built on trust, respect, and mutual care. He was willing to fight for that, no matter what it took. As the days wore on, James realized he had to take more decisive action. Emily wasn't backing down, and her tactics were becoming more aggressive. He had a deep conversation with his father, Chief Jonathan, explaining the situation and revealing his true feelings for Sarah. Jonathan listened carefully, his expression serious. "I've been watching you both, son. I can see the difference between Emily's ambition and Sarah's genuine heart. But understand this, your decision will have consequences. If you want Sarah, you will have to be ready to face the fallout." James nodded, fully aware of what was at stake. "I'm ready, Dad. I've made my choice." Later that week, Chief Jonathan arranged a private meeting with Emily, knowing that the situation needed to be addressed head-on. Emily arrived at his office, confident that she could sway him to see things her way. But when Chief Jonathan looked at her, He didn't see the ambitious woman she was trying to portray. He saw someone who was determined to win at any cost, even if it meant stepping on others along the way. "I know what you want, Emily," he began, his voice stern. "But James has already made his choice. He's chosen Sarah. This rivalry, this obsession you have, it ends now. If you truly care about him, you'll step aside." Emily's face turned pale. But I'm the one who belongs by his side. I've worked for this." Jonathan shook his head. "It's not about work, Emily. It's about love. And Sarah has shown more love and respect than you ever will." As Emily left his office, her heart heavy with rejection, she realized that her plans were unraveling. She had underestimated Sarah, and now she had lost James for good. The atmosphere at work shifted after Emily's confrontation with Chief Jonathan. Sarah, while still cautious, seemed more at ease. It was clear that she had no interest in getting involved in the drama that Emily had created. She continued to focus on her responsibilities and was now gaining the respect of even the most skeptical colleagues. But for James, things were changing too. His relationship with Sarah was deepening, and the love he had for her was growing stronger by the day. As they spent more time together, James felt more certain of his decision. Sarah was the one who had always been there for him from the very beginning. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of his home, watching the sunset, James turned to Sarah with a serious look on his face. "Sarah," he said softly, "I need you to know something. I've made my decision, and I want to be with you, not because of my family's money, but because of you. You're the only one who's shown me what real love looks like." Sarah's heart swelled as she looked into his eyes. "I feel the same way, James," she said quietly. "I never cared about your wealth. What I care about is you." James reached for her hand, and they both knew, without saying another word, that they had found something rare, something worth fighting for. The pressure was building for Emily, who was now desperate to win James back. She had tried everything: manipulation, deceit, and even trying to buy his affection. But nothing worked. James was resolute in his decision to be with Sarah. One evening, Emily went to Sarah's office, her face hard with determination. "I know you think you've won," Emily said, her voice low and dangerous. "But I'm not giving up. James will realize I'm the one for him. You're just a distraction, Sarah." Sarah looked up from her desk, her eyes cold but unwavering. "I don't want to fight with you, Emily, but I will stand by James no matter what." Emily sneered, turning on her heel. "This isn't over, Sarah. I'll make sure you regret this." But as Emily left the office, Sarah remained calm. She had already won. The love and support of James were all she needed. James could no longer ignore the growing tension between him and Emily. It was clear that things had escalated beyond what anyone had expected. Emily's attempts to manipulate people into siding with her had failed, but she was far from giving up. One day, James called Sarah to the park, wanting to speak to her privately. It was here, surrounded by the calmness of nature, that he revealed his true feelings. "Sarah," he said with a deep breath, "I know this has been difficult, and I appreciate everything you've done for me. You've shown me that love is about kindness and understanding. And I want to spend my life with you, without any more doubts or games." Sarah's eyes filled with emotion. She had waited for this moment. She had always known James was the man she wanted. "I've never wanted anything more than to be with you, James," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're the man I've always dreamed of." As James took her hand, he knew that their love would stand the test of time, no matter the challenges that awaited them. As the weeks passed, Emily's attempts to undermine Sarah became more desperate. She would make snide remarks to anyone who would listen, trying to sow discord between the two women. However, despite her efforts, James and Sarah's bond only grew stronger. The two were inseparable, their connection undeniable. Even in the face of Emily's hostility, they had found peace in each other. One day, James overheard Emily talking to a colleague in the hallway. "It's only a matter of time," she hissed. "Once I'm married to James, I'll take over this company. I'll make sure Sarah and her type never get a chance again." James felt a cold fury rise within him. Emily's obsession with him and his family's wealth had reached new heights. He walked up to her, his face hardening as he approached. "Emily, I've had enough," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "You've tried every trick in the book, but it's over. I don't want you. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Your ambitions may have worked on others, but not on me, and certainly not on Sarah." Emily's face twisted with anger as she opened her mouth to argue, but James didn't give her the chance. "You've lost. It's time to move on." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing in the hallway, her pride shattered. Did you learn anything from this story? Let me know in the comments section. Tell me everything you learned from this story. Then, look out for part 2 of this story on this channel.